Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Leslie, for your extremely kind words, and obviously Bochermant and partners for having us here. To start talking about our work, I would like to introduce you a little bit to the intellectual context of our work, and I would like to start talking about this sculpture, this objet trouvé, this piece by Pablo Picasso, who is a Spanish artist born very close to where we live. It's called Bull's Head, but as you can see, it's very obvious that it's made out of the handlebars and the seat of an old rusty bike. And the thing that fascinated us about this piece is the way that Picasso, with a very simple gesture, just by welding two obsolete pieces of junk, is capable of doing something completely new, but at the same time the original elements are very easy to recognize. And Picasso used to talk and write very little about his work, but talking about this particular piece, he said that the sculpture wouldn't have been the same if the elements, the handlebars and the seat, wouldn't have been so easy to recognize. In fact, what he really thought it would have been interesting would have been to throw this art piece to the rubbish, for it to be found by a workman, by a factory worker, so that the factory worker would have realized that actually the sculpture, the bull's head, is made out of the handlebars and the seat of a bike, and so that the factory worker would have sort of dismantled the sculpture to make a new bike with those parts. So what Picasso was talking about was about extending the life cycle of these pieces of junk that he found around his mansion in the south of France, and extend the life cycle and the uses in a very kind of poetic way. So when we approach buildings, we also approach buildings that are like objects trouvés, the objects that we find, and we try to do something similar to what Picasso did with this piece, to make a building or structure that is new. It has a new use, it has a new components, but at the same time, the original parts are very easy to recognize, and the way that we reuse the building helps to understand the original parts as well. The next slide I'm going to show to you is the work of a Spanish artist. She's called Lara Almarcegui, and she's a Spanish artist based in the Netherlands, and this particular piece, this installation, is called the Succession Main Hall 2010, and she was invited to do something in Vienna, and what she did was to analyze the famous Succession building by Otto Wagner, and kind of decompose the building to its most essential construction materials. So in a way, what we're looking here is the Succession Hall, but decomposed and presented as piles of recycled materials, piles of sand, gypsum, clay, concrete, metal. So I think this installation is really inspiring for us, because it kind of talks about the past of the building as materials, the space in its most essential form, that's the construction materials that are used to to build space, to construct space. But at the same time, she is hinting about the future of the building, presenting the building as recycled materials that are ready for them to be used in another construction, in another building, for another use. And that's something that we're also very interested in our work, that is both recycling the building, recycling its use, giving it a new life, extending its life cycle, but at the same time we're also interested in the actual recycling of the materials the building was made of. And you will see later in our projects, in one of the projects that we're going to show, that we are also engaged in the issue of recycling materials on the landscape. Now, in order to understand our work, it's very important for us to show you the landscape that surrounds us, because these projects we're going to show, they have a very close relationship with the landscape. They're very much related to the landscape. And the area where we live, the southeast of Spain, is quite a remote, secluded area. It's probably one of the first or the only man-made deserts in the world, because thousands of years of inhabitation and use of technology had made have created a high degree of deforestation and have created this kind of artificial or man-made landscape that is kind of more related to Arizona than really to the rest of Spain. And actually, this slide is a bit of a joke, because in the 70s, the Italians filmed here what they were called the spaghetti westerns. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there was westerns filmed by an all European crew with Clint Eastwood as the main character, and they filmed like for Fist of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I really love this slide with the misspelling of Hollywood. It usually reads Hollywood. I don't know if the guy who made the signboard didn't know how to spell it in English. And the Spanish flag and the Andalusian flag and the European Union flag waving there, pointing to Fort Bravo, which probably never existed, but it's actually a Fort Bravo in our hometown, made for tourists who want to feel the European Western experience. This kind of barren, desertic landscape is very much the kind of landscape that surrounds us and shapes our projects and the projects we are going to show you tonight. Now, this project is the restoration of 8 calcination furnaces in Lucanena de las Torres, Almeria. This is, as you can see, I'm going to try to use the pointer. I'm going to be brave. So let's see how it works. This is a very small white village, very close to the Mediterranean Sea, very beautiful. And here there are the 8 calcination furnaces that we were commissioned to restore. And as you can see, what we found was these 8 furnaces that were really falling apart. They were crumbling and surrounded by rubble and kind of wild vegetation. So we were not really able to understand what was going on there. So we had to start our research and understand what was going on there. So what we found is that we found actually a lot of documentation and photographies about these furnaces. And what we found is that during the 19th century, mainly English and German mining companies tried to establish themselves in the south of Spain. They were aware that since Roman times, this area was a place for mining, and they established this mining company here to extract iron ore. They started the mining activity. They started the mining activity, but later, since it worked well for a couple of years, but later the quality of the mineral they were finding was really poor. So they had to find ways to increase the level, the proportion of iron ore in the mineral in order to sell it and make it profitable. So they built these calcination furnaces to do this chemical process, calcinating the mineral that they found, and sell it. So they created these furnaces with the chimneys, and a very complicated network of trains to serve, to make the mine function. So that we got involved in kind of researching how these furnaces worked, and what we found is that they brought these from the mines. They brought this low quality mineral and downloaded here in this upper platform, and they will later load the furnaces with this low quality mineral. And the furnaces had these grills or crates that didn't allow the mineral to reach the bottom of the furnace, and they would light a huge bonfire with the woods from the surrounding forest there to increase the temperature very highly for a sustained period of time. Once that they thought that the mineral was calcinated, they would carry it out of the furnaces, stock it, and actually stock it here in this two artificial planes that they had in front of the furnaces. Now, with this complicated network of trains they were able to transport the mineral from the mines through these mountains and through these plains to this very beautiful, remote, small fishing village where they had a wooden pier. They built a wooden pier to upload the mineral in the cargo ships that would transport them to Germany or England or even the north of Spain. Actually, the north of Spain was the main client of this mine. So what we found was this really, the furnaces were in really pretty bad shape. They were falling apart literally. They were in really bad condition, and we were wondering what happened, because these mines were actually closed fairly recently in 1941. So we were wondering what caused this very accelerated process of deterioration, and the fact that we found a lot of rubble around the furnaces with elements and with bricks and masonry that belong to the furnaces. So what we actually found is that the furnaces had been looted during the 20th century, and the locals, probably after the Spanish Civil War, in the 40s and 50s, when Spain was under very harsh economic conditions, they were forced to loot and steal elements from these furnaces, mainly masonry and the beautiful fire brick that we found. It's an English fire brick that was brought especially from England to build these furnaces. And paradoxically, we found that the upper parts of the furnaces were much better preserved than the lower parts, because the the kind of conservation of these furnaces were conditioned by the height of a person on a ladder, stealing material from the furnaces. So paradoxically, the upper parts were in much better condition than the lower parts. But obviously, the stealing, the extraction of material, removal of material, together with the weather conditions, with weathering, had created a very aggressive environment, and the furnaces were literally falling apart. So what we did, and I'm getting back to one of the first slides, this installation by Lara and Martha. What we literally did was to compile, classify, arrange, and clean the material, the original materials that we found around the furnaces, to reuse it in the reconstruction. So as you can see here in this slide, we rebuilt most of the interior of the furnaces with the materials that we found around them. So we were literally, in this project, we literally recycled the materials that we found. And I feel to be honest, I feel a little sad talking about these fire bricks, because we've been this morning we've been visiting Constitution Hill, and we've seen the way that the bricks from the jail were reused, and I think the political meaning of that reuse is really brilliant, and we don't have that here, but we managed to recycle not only like I said, it's one of the principles we work with, not only recycling the buildings themselves or the structures that we found, but also the materials that we found. So, and now I'm going to present you with a video that will explain our work, I think, much better than myself. So, in order to explain this design, it's really everything is very simple. It's very minimal. What we decided was to use these two existing platforms that were there with store ore, iron ore, to use them as sort of welcoming platforms for people to park their cars. And because of property reasons, this is quite strange, but the owner of this piece of land didn't want people to go through it because he has planted some cultivations there. So we had to build this bridge to cross this ditch that was originally there, made by the mining company. And we kind of established two pathways, one leading to the 7 remaining furnaces that we just preserved, and another one leading towards this first furnace that we restored. And we also made a design and staircase to go up to this upper platform that I was talking to you about when I explained how the mines worked. This is a general view of the design of the project. As you can see, there is this first furnace that we've restored, and the other remaining 8 ones are just preserved. So this is a project that has I've lectured about this project in Italy. In Italy, they're very interested about this project. I think for a number of reasons, but mainly because you can see here 2 very different ways of acting or working on an existing building and do restoration. One is the kind of more orthodox, let's say the more orthodox way of just preserving what is there, and that's what we did in the 7 first furnaces. And then there is the reconstruction part in the first one, and I think that's we managed. We could do that because we had a lot of documentation, a lot of scientific evidence about how this first furnace looked like. So we had a lot of support to rebuild it or reconstruct it and make it look like the original structure. And I think, honestly, the Italians are interested in this because they deal with such old ruins that they don't have a clue of how they look like. They really can make it. So I think they're interested in things that can be you are able to know how they look like, or how they looked, or how the way they look like. And so here you can see the furnace and the staircase going up to the upper platform, the bridge connecting the upper platform with the chimney of the first furnace, and the staircase going up. We really wanted to make this staircase a very special element. We didn't want to make a staircase that is dealing with that digs the ground or is grafted onto the ground, onto the soil. We wanted this staircase to be more like a piece of furniture that sits on top of the ground, on top of these slender metal columns, metal props. And we also wanted to be, like Le Corbusier said, a kind of a architecture promenade, on a walkway that would make the visitor or give the visitors these generous landings that would allow them to think, talk, contemplate the landscape, and to go up in a meandering way, trying to slow the pace of the visitor and trying for them to get into the mood, into the atmosphere, this very quiet, peaceful, metaphysical atmosphere that surrounds these structures, the kind of feel the kind of enormous power of this landscape. So these are the kind of landings I was talking about, these kind of generous spaces. This is another photograph showing the upper platform and the staircase going up and the chimney of the furnace. As you can see here, our design was very minimal. We didn't want to touch the existing soil. We didn't want to interfere with what was already there. So our the design is really dealing with lack of materials and the use of very little material, we designed this platform leading to the walkway that surrounds the chimney of this furnace, and we like very much this photograph, sort of showing the contrast between the Platonic conical shape of the chimney and the organic, barren, desertic nature of the mountains around it. Now, coming back to the interior of the furnaces, as I said, we reused most of the material that we found, the original fabric, to rebuild the furnaces, but of course we didn't find enough material to rebuild all of them. So what we did was to design this system with layers of limestone mortar that was originally used also for the construction of these furnaces, in order to create a kind of base or support for this original bricks that were cantilevering and were falling down and stopped them falling. And we love this kind of contrast between the velvety quality of the limestone mortar and this kind of cranked, burned, smoked, neat texture of the burnt fabric. I think it's a beautiful contrast that we really enjoyed, and also the light coming into the furnaces. So we were very, very interested in this contrasting textures. And this is the interior of the first furnace, the one that we reconstructed. As you can see, here we have the three textures: cotton steel texture of the chimney, the kind of this burnt, smoked, I would say even twisted nature of this brick that has suffered so much because of the heat. And then these layers of recycled fabric that we recovered from the rubble and restored and cleaned to make the interior lining of this furnace. Okay. So the second work we're going to show is this the restoration of this Nasrid Tower in Huercal-Overa, Almeria. This is the project that Leslie was talking about. And this is a very interesting project because this is a tower sitting on top of a hill overlooking the landscape in the southeast of Spain. Again, in this environment, this landscape, we used to work with this barren, desertic landscape that surround us. And at the beginning, when we started working on this project, we were told that this was a watchtower, because to kind of introduce you to the historical context that this building was built. As you may know, the Iberian Peninsula was occupied by the Moors, the North Africans, for 7 centuries, and they occupied almost the whole of the Iberian Peninsula. But when this tower was built in the 13th century, the Nasrid kingdom, that was the last Moorish kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula, was really small in size and was really shrinking, surrounded by Catholic kingdoms, and they had this very complex and intelligent network of watchtowers that would light fire on top of the watchtower to warn other watchtowers that there was the enemy was approaching. So they had this network, and these historians thought that this tower was part of that network. But we thought that the tower was so really big. In fact, as you can see, it's really well placed on top of a hill, overlooking these two dry riverbeds that Christians used to raid these Muslim Moorish Nasrid areas with what you call in English scorched earth policy. And but we thought the tower was too big, so we got involved with archaeologists to find that actually this was not just simply a watchtower, but actually was part of a fortress with three smaller towers that we found foundations of, and three full walls that we know of. So, but the interesting thing was when we got to this tower, we found this is what we found. We found this crazy eclectic building with this Doric columns, this Italianesque staircase with this Arabic, this kind of romantic Arabic version of Islamic arch, the battlements and the walls and of course this construction here, the WC, the WC, sorry, we call it in Spanish butter, with this a very bad Spanish pronunciation for the English word water, and the water closet. So we were very intrigued with what we found here, this eclectic mixture of elements from different times, and we had to do our research as well to get to know what was really going on there. And we found a very also interesting story, because this tower during the dictatorship, the fascist dictatorship that Franco had in Spain during the 40s and 50s, he decided for whatever reason to sell a number of fortresses and monuments that he thought were not worthwhile for the state to own. And this was one of these monuments or castles that he sold, and it was bought by a guy who wanted to become, by a person who wanted to become a nobleman. So apparently in Spain, if you want to become a nobleman, you have to own a castle. And he decided to make this tower his castle, literally. So he built all these bizarre, eclectic constructions to build his castle and use it as a weekend home. And of course, he needed the water closet, and he made it very clearly there. And the things that the guy later got his nobiliary, his aristocratic title, because his son became Home Office Affairs Minister. I don't know how you call it in South Africa, but he was a socialist Home Office Affairs Minister, and of course he gave the title, the aristocratic title, to his father. And I think if he would have known, he would have saved a lot of money and a lot of trouble to us and to this tower, because he would have got this title the easy way. And one of the things he did was to create a new entry to the tower, because the original entry to this tower was down through the first floor. The Nasrids brought the construction with rammed earth to the Iberian Peninsula. Actually, the Alhambra is also built with rammed earth. And what they used to do is a very sensible way of building. They created this massive, solid basement. The buildings didn't almost have foundations, but they had this, let's say, this on-surface foundation made of this massive block of round earth, and then they were building walls that were diminishing in height, in the width at the same time that the loads were decreasing. So for practical reasons, this tower was had an entry in the first floor because this tower was a kind of last resort for them, last resort means of defense. So in case that the Catholics, the Christian would manage to overcome the walls, the defensive walls, they would retreat to this tower. They probably had a scale or lever made of rope, and they would pull up the rope and close the door behind them to try to stay safe until the Christian warriors or army left the castle. So what we found was a really, really deteriorated interior, as you can see. When this guy got fed up because he wasn't getting his aristocratic title, he forgot about the tower, and it sort of felt in disuse. And actually, it was a space for the locals to smoke weed, especially the youngsters, to smoke weed, take drugs, have sex, and I think a lot of unwanted children were conceived in this tower, sadly. So the interior was really in a really, really poor condition when we got there. And again, I'm going to show you a video showing the design, and I think this is much better than me talking about it. So when we approached the design, my first, she drew this sketch, and I think that's a key sketch showing what we wanted to do, because we wanted to confront our design with the will to last, with the kind of will to perdure in time that this construction had. It had endured centuries of mistreatment, and still it had a very strong presence. And we wanted to establish this contrast between the timelessness and the kind of solidity and the will to perdure of this tower, made by anonymous craftsmen, and the kind of ephemeral liquid nature of the contemporary. And we felt very strongly that contrast had to be part of our design. So in the sketch, you can see that the tower, because it's square, it's prismatic. We wanted to design a staircase reclaiming the original entry through the first floor, but we wanted to make something in opposition to the tower. So that the staircase the tower is very solid, is squarey. The staircase is kind of very light, is kind of punctuated with holes. It has a temporary nature. The materials that we use are completely the opposite materials. It's like this pre-rusted cotton steel in contrast to the kind of timelessness of the original rammed earth and limestone mortar that was used in the original tower. And what we designed was what we decided for our design was to kind of leave this already existing platforms as welcoming platforms for the visitors to, well, bars and cars could be parked. We had a kind of welcoming area, kind of square, welcoming square area. And then we had this visitor center. And what we did was to reclaim the original access to the tower, designing this kind of meandering pathway and getting rid of this very Western Italian staircase that was laying there, recovering this more Eastern, more Eastern Islamic way to accessing a building through a meandering pathway, and then we of course designed this staircase to reclaim the original entry through the first floor. Now, as you can see here, this is the staircase, and this is the staircase, and this is the visitor center. These are some benches that we designed, and they all have this quality that they can be very easily removed. So that we wanted to think about the visitor center is like a ship container that has been laid there to rest and can be easily removed with a crane to be taken somewhere else. We did exactly the same. We used the same design strategy with these concrete blocks that we use as a kind of street furniture or benches for people to sit and talk and contemplate the landscape. Concrete blocks that can be removed with a crane, and we also wanted to do the same with the staircase. So the sense of removable or removability of our design is very present in what we wanted to do there. This picture also shows these elements that are kind of ready to be removed, and also the pathway that we design it's not that it's sort of resting also on top of the existing topography. We didn't want to interfere with the existing topography and the archaeological remains that were there. So actually we made infills of land, and we built the pathway on top of that soil that we added to the existing topography. We also wanted the nature, the topography, and the vegetation to remain, to grow naturally. We didn't want to plant anything there, so that the vegetation, all the bushes that are growing there are vegetation that grows naturally in the area. And you can see the path going up, and of course in the tower itself we had to do some restoration because of the construction method that they use. They laid like round earth. They made blocks of round earth, but they joined them. They used to join the Nasrids, used to join them with limestone mortar. So the outer crust of the tower is actually a kind of layer of limestone mortar. So what we did is to clean and preserve that existing outer layer of limestone mortar, but in some areas, like this upper part of the tower, the mortar and the rammed was in such bad condition that we had to restore it, adding new layers of mortar, of limestone mortar, that we tried to have it with the same or very similar chemical composition that the original lime mortar used in the construction of this tower. Of course, we lacked the craftsmanship that they had, the Nasrids had, and that's the main difference. Here you can see the tower and how it's the holes. We made holes in it to create this, what Le Corbusier called this kind of architecture promenade, and made the visitor establish relationships with the surrounding landscape, the village, the mountains, the sky, and all the natural and human-made elements that kind of surround the building. Here you can see the tower as well, with the bits that were rebuilt or reconstructed or repaired, and the tower, the staircase with these holes that make connections between different elements of the landscape. Now, this is the bridge that connects with the tower. We wanted to make it as light and as possible to somehow create the feeling that this was a very, that the original entry was a very provisional light entry. These photographs show the interior of this staircase, this architecture promenade I was talking about, and the kind of the framing of the landscape that we wanted to make to look at certain elements like the village or the sky in this case, and the other elements like the pathway and the precasted elements that made this pathway. Some kind of photographs showing the interplay of light and material inside the tower. And as you can see here, this is the kind of contrast I was talking about between the original limestone mortar that was sort of covering the tower and the new one, and that we had to use to repair the most damaged parts of the tower. This is a detail of the staircase, and this is probably our favorite slide, showing the staircase and the kind of the entry to the building, and the relationship between the kind of Platonic volumes of the staircase and the organic nature of the clouds and the desertic, barren mountains in the background, and kind of, I think, make the visitor confront kind of the body with the sky and the earth. It's a very raw kind of sensation, feeling. It's like this you, the sky, and the earth. Now, this is the interior of the tower. As you can see, this is the first floor. We found here a kind of escape route they had in case of a siege. This is a kind of a passage leading to the hills that surround the tower. And we were very careful. We wanted to be very careful with the floor, for example. There were different layers of flooring, and we were not, and even the archaeologists couldn't really tell what the original flooring was. So what we did was to place this floor sitting on top of the existing flooring, and we wanted it not to touch the walls, so there is a little gap between the walls and the floor itself to give the feeling that this floor is not permanent, that this is a kind of provisional flooring that we had to place there, but can be very easily removed and give this kind of provisional feeling that we wanted to have it for the interior of the tower. Now, this is the staircase. We kept the original staircase. We added the handrails, but we thought this probably gave a very gave to the visitor the original feeling of going up that very steep staircase. And here you can see those two holes that were dug in the walls of the tower during the Spanish Civil War. They were supposed to be used to shoot machine guns, and we had a debate about it, but we decided to leave them there, although they're not original. They're not an original component of the building, but it's also part of our history, of our national history, the fact that there was a civil war, and this tower was kind of reused as a fortress during the Republicans and the fascist civil war in Spain in the 40s, in the late 30s, sorry. Now this is the staircase again going up. You can see the floor and the vaults and the brickwork, and as you can see here, we found this brickwork that was underneath the layers of different layers of covering that the tower had. This is a kind of brickwork which is, I think, it's very beautiful, but it wasn't designed to be seen. It was designed to be covered with mortar. But we decided to let it to not to cover it, for the visitor to kind of contemplate this really rather practical but at the same beautiful brickwork. And here you can see all the vaults and the arches that they designed and they made in this upper floor. This was the upper level was the lodgings of the chief of the army that was stationed there. So it's a much more spacious, much more palatial kind of lodgings. He had these windows overlooking the landscape and to help him to let him know if there were any kind of advances of the enemy. And they had, of course, this path leading up to the upper floor, to the roof, of the tower, in order to light this bonfire these bonfires that they used to warn the other towers. To were part of this network of towers that were connected visually by the smoke of these bonfires, and were used to warn the population of further attacks. And this is again the arches and the vaults in this upper floor, and the ladder going up, leading up to the roof of the building. Now, this is a very interesting thing. This is one of the most interesting things we found in this project. When we first got there, we were it was very dark, and we took photographs of everything, and we really couldn't see anything. And when we got back to the office, Mercedes started overlooking all those photographs and doing all sorts of treatments on them. And she started saying to me that she was seeing lines, and I was really worried. I really thought she lost her mind. I thought, she's seeing lines now. This is horrible. But actually, she was right, and there were lines carved in this wall. And what she found was a tree of life. The tree of life is a Islamic symbol. But actually it's a Persian symbol that traces back to the old Mesopotamic religions, and it's a symbol of the universe. And the Shia Muslims, they incorporated it into the imaginary, and it was brought to the Iberian Peninsula by the Nasrids. And it's the Tree of Life represents the universe, the kind of complexity of the universe, the ever-expanding universe, with in this case with with God at the center of it. So as you can see, the guy who designed, who carved this Tree of Life was not a professional artist. As you can see here, there's really no symmetry in the design. There's no symmetry. The geometries are really not well calculated. It's a piece done by an amateur. And we think that it was possible because most of the people stationed at this fortress were actually prisoners, people who had committed crimes, were brought here in order to pay for the crimes in this very dangerous border frontier fortress full of attacks. And so probably this guy was a visitor, or was once visited the Alhambra and had the chance to contemplate the Tree of Life. There are a couple of trees of life in the Alhambra, to contemplate it, and he wanted to reproduce it here. Now, the interesting thing for us is that we told the municipality about this finding, and they were very quick to find to hire a graphic designer to design this logo, this Árbol de la Vida, Huercal-Overa means Tree of Life, and Huercal-Overa, that's the population. So he designed this Tree of Life, and the municipality were really quick to adapt this logo into the life. So they've taken it to really to the extreme. They've designed plates for souvenirs with the tree of life on. They made street furniture with the Tree of Life, and these are the councillors, the guys who rule the municipality. These are with the Tree of Life T-shirt on, and the most amazing and the most bizarre, I don't know how to call it, but really something that really appeals to Adam and make us really comfortable is the fact that they made this competition called the Tree of Life around the world. So they encourage locals to travel around the world wearing this the Tree of Life T-shirt. So this woman here, she's collecting coffee in Colombia. The other one is obviously at the White House, and the guys are in Nepal or Tibet or whatever. And at the end of the year, they award a prize to the most exotic location where the Tree of Life has been. So I think it's really coming back to the words that Mercedes was saying. For us, it's really the important thing is that architecture is for the people. Architecture is not for architects. Architecture is for the people. We try to make beautiful architecture, but this is a side product of what we want. We want architecture to work for the people. And we're really proud that this building, this construction, this tower that was derelict, abandoned, was a place for a smoking pot or taking drugs or whatever, is now not only part of the community and the heritage, but it's now the symbol of the municipality. So that they taking this heritage, they reclaim this heritage that was there for centuries and they didn't really know anything about. And through our research and our work and the restoration and the new use we're giving to this building, we somehow have managed to bring it back to the community and make the community part of it. And I think that's the most successful part of this building. And I think that's it. Thank you very much, and I don't know if